We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
How would you like to see Ireland develop in the immediate future?
Well, two things, what is likely to happen, what I would like to see happen.
What together we can do for the freedom of man.
Emigration by Mary Grogan. All 8 great-grandparents of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy were Irish. How 2 of these, a son of a Wexford man and a daughter of a Clare man, met and fell in love in an American town might not surprise anyone here today. The steady flow of emigrants from this country was actually the theme of the final speech of President John F. Kennedy as he left Shannon after his 4-day visit in 1963. The link between Ireland and America is a constantly renewed one. The Irish factor, in turn, is never lost to the creativity of US presidents, and it is a very powerful force in American political life. The immigration route was an option in times of economic stringency, and sometimes the only option, one of life and death. James Hickey, father of Mary Augusta, who married Patrick J. Kennedy, came from the townland of Kilkieran, a townland in the parish of Newmarket-on-Fergus, which at the time of James's birth in 1835 was the address of 15 households and a population of 96, which had shrunken to 2 houses and a population of 10 people by 1890. Today, it is rich grazing land for one owner, and, as if making this statement about its history public knowledge, a graveyard, later confined to the burial space of unbaptized children, shares the field with cattle. A field where once children played and women sang and men were revived in their poverty by each other's company. The easy access, at least for a short visit, is the privilege of travellers today. For James Hickey, when he arrived in the New World, he must have been lonely and fearful. A lime-washed cottage would eventually be exchanged for the White House by one of his own kin, but there was an almost unending bridge to cross. Biographers tell us that the early immigrants occupied menial positions, and then, as their children were educated under a constitution which boasted of equality, they availed of more comfortable positions and enjoyed a better standard of living. Some in the next generation, as in James Hickey's family, aimed at serving in public life and advancing through the ranks to serve in the highest position in the land. James Hickey was born in 1835 to Michael and Catherine Nay Hassett of Kilkieran. Having emigrated to Boston, he married a Cork woman, Margaret Field, in 1857. Their daughter, Mary Augusta, born in 1857, married Patrick Kennedy, whose son Joseph married Rose Fitzgerald in 1914, and the couple then giving birth to John in 1917. Fitzgeralds of Bruff and Kennedys of Doughanstown celebrate their prominency in the life of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Today, due to the perseverance, tradition-keeping and diligence of the Conroy family, especially Philly and her family, we will hear the Hickey and the Hassett connection was kept alive, even before the advent of fame of Kilkieran's worthy son. There were 3 daughters and 2 sons in the family of Michael Hickey, according to a survey of the Dromoland estate in 1837. His holding was a cabin and 1 acre. The family accounted for 7 of the Kilkieran population of 69, divided amongst 14 households. Newmarket and Fergus church records differ. Only 4 sons are recorded there. Tom, born in 1830, John in 1833, James in 1835, and Charles in 1839. The fact that the church baptismal records did not start until 1828 or 29 account for this discrepancy. Andrew Pierce, a genealogist, supplies details of the children from the American records. The children missing from the church records were Bridget, born 1817, Patrick, 1819, Michael, 1823, Catherine, 1827, and Anne, 1829. All of Michael's family, including his wife, emigrated to Boston. They are recorded in the passenger list of the Tri-Mountain, which arrived 12th of June 1851. Michael, their son and brother, was already there, having left for New York, arriving the 1st of June 1847, and then transferring to Boston, where he worked as a coachman. Did he leave Ireland before the others to prepare the way for the rest of the family? There is no record of his father and householder, Michael Hickey, who in 1851 would have been aged 61. As the children married, new names were added. Michael married Eliza, Bridget James Driscoll, Patrick married Mary, Anne married Patrick Halloran. A reflection on the immigration of the whole family, like the Hickeys, smells of disorder in the home country. Nothing could be more true. The Great Famine had wreaked havoc on those at the lower end of the economic scale, like the Hickeys. Emigration was the only option for the Hickey household when there were 2 major upsets to the status quo. The most pronounced upon of the 2 was the Great Famine, but before it ever raised its ugly head in violation of the potato crop, clearances of tillers with cottages on the Dromoland estate were the only option, it appeared, for a landlord whose economic survival depended on cattle rather than tillage. The Napoleonic Wars had ensured a market for grain to Great Britain while they lasted, but afterwards, tariffs and the Corn Laws prevailed. An agricultural survey of 1849 shows that there were only 3 cows and 1 dry cow and 1 pig among 9 households. An acre of tillage would have provided for subsistence rather than economic viability. What qualities, then, did the new family of immigrants bring to the New World? Were they likely to progress, as it was rumoured they would? Or was it possible they would end up in the slums of their chosen city? Antagonism against Irish Catholics was rife in Boston and other American cities. JFK told us that his great-grandfather brought 2 things from Ireland.
A strong religious faith and a strong desire for liberty.
Did he omit something? In an 1837 survey of Kilkieran held in the National Library, Dublin, 14 households are recorded for Kilkieran townland. One of the householders is a widow, 2 are described as carmen, 1 as a sawyer, and the remainder as labourers. A sawyer was a skilled worker whose work in the construction of houses, tools, carts and furniture ensured him a secure living. Likewise, the carmen had assurance of employment in the estate itself and expanding to the public roads, which since 1800 were developing in this area. The main Limerick-Ennis road passed near the junction of Kilkieran, Alcotty and Artsullas townlands, and the coach stopped at the toll house there. It is reasonable to assume a private carman could be hired for helping a gentleman and his entourage on the homeward straight. By the time James decided to emigrate, the main road was by Bunratty, Newmarket and Latoon, a change made possible by the building of the bridges in Bunratty in 1804 and Latoon in 1785, as well as the securing of the banks of the Shannon and Fergus estuaries. The busyness of these roads would rise again with the opening of the railway in 1859, but by then the family had relocated to Boston. Their fortune was insured over time, but was it paved for them by the relative secure employment as coachman of son Michael, who blazed the trail to Boston 2 years earlier than his siblings and mother? And was it not his grandfather Michael who had shown him the way? In the dark, all cats are grey. Only a common mouse can smell the enterprising one. The proto-capitalist gene for advancing through the ranks was inherited by Mary Augusta. When she met the son of the cooper from Dunganstown, she seized the opportunity, encouraging throughout his political career, laying out his clothes and ensuring he had a bowl of chowder before a meeting in the House of Representatives or the Senate. Shrewd also, in that she named her son Joseph instead of Patrick, to avoid the contempt of those with anti-Irish sentiments. The carman from Kilkieran, as well as the cooper from Dunganstown, were about to come of age. From the 12th to the 16th centuries, the kingdom of the Dalgash was reduced to County Clare, Limerick and parts of Tipperary around Neenah. In the 16th century, it was coextensive with the present county of Clare, with the addition of Inishcaltra and Clonrush, now in County Galway, and Castleconnell, now in County Limerick. Patrick Kennedy of Dunganstown is the best known great-grandparent of JFK. The Kennedy surname is associated with the Dalkashian clan, and prior to the availability of DNA testing in 2004, it was a general assumption that all Irish Kennedys were related. Current DNA testing proves that there was an earlier Irish Kennedy ancestor who were genetically separate from the Dalgash and their Clare origins. James Hickey, as a Dalkashian, survives the test. Prior to the 13th century, the Hickey family lived near Killaloe. Later, their home territory was Ballyhickey, near Quin. They are descended, like the O'Kennedys, from the second wave of Celts to settle in Ireland between 500 and 100 BC. Traditionally, the Hickeys were physicians to the clans of the Dalgash and to the other clans. They were known for brain surgery and for mending skull bone fractures and other head wounds sustained in battle. What a paradox that one of their most famous members should die of those very injuries. What a paradox also that one of the theories around his fatal wounding implicates an accidental shot by a security guard. A security guard by the name of George Hickey. JFK never visited Dromoland Castle Hotel. His plan to return
To see old Shannon's face again.
was cut short by his untimely death. But in the light of the strong presence of his ancestors in the Dromoland estate, it is likely he would have eventually returned to complete his ancestral tour. How did Dromoland, home to an O'Brien chief who was created a baronet by King James, and later, with the demise of other branches of his family, acquired the titles Earl and Marquis, and otherwise Baron and Lord Inchiquin, become involved with assisted emigration and the return of families of emigrants? The English system, brought to Ireland in the mid-16th century, allowed positions of power and claims to land only to those who surrendered their lands and forfeited their religion, unilaterally Catholic. Resentment followed. First, amongst the closely related clans members, they would at least have a chance under Dervina rules of kinship to the 4th degree to vote for a new chief. Resentment too was felt by those deprived of support available under the Gaelic or Brehon system. Even in the 19th century it was felt. A man deprived of food for several days, who was rebuffed by the Lord, obviously dressed in leather, remembered his history. He composed the verse as he made his way down the steps in the hearing of the Lord. In 100 years from now, and 100 more to back it, no one will ever know who wore the leather jacket. In all fairness to the baronets, marquises and lords of Dromoland, their outstanding reputation was one of kindness and helpfulness, so much so that the castle and grounds were left unmolested, both in the insurrection of 98, the activities of the tithe wars of the 1830s, and in the 20th century War of Independence. But like the other lords of their times, they were faithful to some of the schema for ancient Irish kings, how they spend their days, as outlined in An Cric Eulach. Sunday for drinking ale, Monday for judgment, Tuesday for playing Fela, chess, Wednesday for watching hounds meet, Thursday for sexual union, Friday for racing horses, and Saturday again for judging. Their grounds were for pleasure. An illustrated pamphlet by Baronet Edward IV on a day's shooting in Dromoland revealed that the whole domain was involved. Tenants were recruited to help beat out the birds, and the hunt pursued the prey wherever the latter took it. A story in folk tradition tells of the son of an employee putting a few birds aside in lieu of payment as he set out to help his father lay traps. But being caught, he was summoned before the Lord, and when dismissed, he remarked to those around, "Have ye ever heard of a man being fired before he earned his first pay?" The local parish priest took a less humorous view, obviously thinking about the more serious implications when, following the ending of the Napoleonic Wars, the grounds at the east of the estate, now used for tillage, were to be retained as pasture land only. Rejecting a brace of pheasant sent to him by the Lord that Christmas, forfeiting possibly a continuation of their friendship, he wrote to him, "You got rid of your peasants to make room for your pheasants. I want none of your presents." And the rhyme has entered the dictionary of folklore via the Arne Thompson Index of Folk Tales. Resented or not by the tenantry, in time clearances took place. The most significant being Mahon, Kilkiernan and Rathfolan townlands. Clearances in the case of Dromoland were accompanied by the enlargement of the domain. Relocation was offered to those affected in townlands outside of the domain, still within the estate. This process, affecting 9 townlands, meant that the townlands Alcotty, Ballygreen, Lochgash, Newmarket and Carnakella gained 20 holdings, while Kilkieran, Mahon, Rathfolan and Balnacraga lost 33 holdings from 1843 to 1855. We are reminded of this cataclysmic change to the fortune of our ancestors by the sight of the 85-acre Reedy's Field, north of the junction for Mahon Fort on the Orr 458 in the townland of Rathfolan. It is now part of the domain, and on the way to Mahon Castle, which overlooks Mahon Field, clearances 20 years later offered a similar site. The burden of poor rates, which the landlord was obliged to pay when valuation was under £4, as well as the economic preference for cattle above tillage, caused the clearances. Those departing their holdings had an option of emigration or relocation. According to another researcher, James S. Donnelly, wherever a large decline of population took place, the loss is likely to have resulted in an unusual amount of emigration. Psalm 126 sings of our emigrants. They go out carrying seeds for the sowing, their hearts filled with pain. The story of immigration is a two-edged sword. The story of tears salting the ocean and dampening the home hearth until they come back. They come back carrying their sheaves, their hearts filled with joy. The life cycle of this process is 3 generations. A couple of stages mark its existence: poverty, bordering destitution, conquest of racial rejection and contempt, a lucky break, education, position cum status, acceptance and adoption of business skills. A beginning and ending of the sad immigration cycle may be traced in the grounds of Dromoland Castle, itself transformed from the scene of immigration to that of receiving home the immigrant. One happy Irish American is involved, and it's time to tell his story. It happened that 2 evicted Galway tenants who were on their way walking from Ardrahan in County Galway in 1862 to Cove in County Cork to catch an emigrant ship bound for the United States of America. Suddenly the stylish piers and elegant gates of Dromoland Castle appeared before them and caught the eye of the woman. "Those must be the gates of the Lord," she said. The couple's proud and well-heeled grandson returned, having made his fortune, built on their hardship endurance, hard work, luck, and hope. Remembering their curiosity, he set about finding Dromoland Castle. And as it came for sale, negotiating with Dr. Brendan O'Regan, he decided to buy it. On the 1st of January 1963, Bernard McDonough paid £66,000 to Donogh O'Brien, 16th Baron Inchiquin, for the castle and 350 acres of Dromoland. His desire was to convert Dromoland Castle into a 5-star hotel. A castle surely stood at the very end of a continuum of housing, from mud cabin through one of stone to comfortable farmhouse with a pump in the yard and a parlour for visitors, types found in the grounds of Bunratty Folk Park, and for the very purpose of reminding immigrants and visitors of the style of accommodation available to their forefathers. The closing of this social gap was surely the ultimate achievement of Bernard, its owner, and for those not disposed to purchase it, it was still a pinnacle of their worldly ambition. To stay there even for a night. They came back. They came back. Their hearts filled with joy, carrying their sheaves. We remember their arrival on Sunday in sleek, shiny, black Austin princesses, chauffeur-driven by a lady in a white crochet dress, who drove gently but boldly to the very gates of the church. Were her passengers demanding compensation for the desperation of their grandparents and their sad dismissal? As they alighted, we stopped and stared and soaked in the vision. And we tried to answer their questions, usually asked in threes. Where was the restroom? And when left unanswered, where can we get a cab? Can you recommend somewhere for corn on the cob, a T-bone steak and French fries? To which question we refrained from responding. If we knew, we'd eat it ourselves. A beaker? A sweatshirt? Iced water? In the middle of July, we thought. Did we know anyone called Mahoney, Callaghan, Docherty, Shaughnessy? Their own family name. And we gave them the Bunratty experience, the cliffs of Moher, Lahinch and the Burren. Only one or two would stop where there were a few sheep grazing on a stony hill, and we knew they were wondering what it was like in Ireland in famine times. An immigrant who did not make the journey he promised to make on leaving the country in Shannon was John Fitzgerald Kennedy. He would have understood more than most because he was a historian himself, and we could have shown him Rathfoland without its holdings, and Mahon with its two ruins, and Kilkieran where his own great-grandfather and his siblings left in 1851. His brother Ted came all right, and he told his friend and fellow senator Paul Sheehy that his Hickey ancestors were buried in Kilnasula